I have with me here today, this morning, the Minister of Education and our Minister of Social Development, Family Affairs. I have asked you all to come here, as has become customary over the last 48 to 72 hours, for us to give you a briefing on what is taking place as part of the whole response to the unfortunate situations we've been facing, is providing proper and truthful communication. Having said that, I'd like to start once again by re-emphasizing and using the opportunity to once again thank all of the servicemen and women who have been out since Friday night, dutifully doing their duty, protecting and serving, rescuing people, and now assisting with the cleaning up exercise across the affected areas in Trinidad. I thank them, I commend them. They have done yeoman service. I have heard persons criticizing them. I've heard people attacking them over the period. That is very disheartening, because I have been there alongside them in many areas, and they are giving their best, and I thank God for the work they have done. Not to be forgotten are public servants who have also come out in this time of need and are there working alongside and getting their jobs done. And especially now in the cleanup area, as I'll come to in a short while, the public servants who are out there doing the assessments, assisting with the cleanup, and even those who have just been helping their friends and their family who are affected at this time. All of the volunteers, once again, Trinidad and Tobago has shown its true colors. There's a lot of hope for our country as we go forward, because citizens, there's been an outpouring of love, caring, and people not only talking, but willing to volunteer, not only volunteer goods and services, but also to get down on the ground and assist in helping. That is commended. Now, on the flip side of that, it would be remiss of me not at this stage to once again establish that there are a number of dissatisfactory things taking place, and one in particular is the politicizing of what is taking place. This government and this administration has been out there assisting our citizens in our respective roles, doing what it is we're supposed to do. And I can speak without fear of contradiction. We do not call out the media and the cameras and take our own cameras. I have been on the ground since first thing Saturday morning. I was there pulling out our resources, speaking to Minister Sinan, the two ministers at my side on Friday night, other ministers, Kazem Hussein, informing the Prime Minister from since Friday night when this started to take place, speaking to ODPM, speaking to other first responders, and making sure that things were being put in place. We have been doing our job. And I can say, without fear of contradiction, we are not about, at this stage, we haven't done it, and we will not start in the political hypocrisy that is taking place. When we go out and we do our jobs, we do it. I personally, I was on the ground for 2 hours yesterday in Greenville. I did not call the media. The media are asking, where are you going to be? I don't respond to that, because this is not for us about the photo opportunity. This is not for us about PR. This government has been completely focused from the Prime Minister go down on delivering to the people. All people could not be delivered to at the same time. By definition, if you have an area that is underwater with hundreds of people and you just have 2 or 3 vessels, that's boats, you have to prioritize who you take care of first. And that is what was done. So I repeat, those who are looking to draw the government into politicizing of a very difficult time for thousands and thousands of our citizens, we are not going to be drawn into that. Our citizens are civic-minded and right-thinking, and they can see for themselves what is taking place. I just heard a senator give a contribution attacking the Prime Minister and saying that when she arrived in a certain place, he was on dry land. That was the second time for the day that the Prime Minister had come to Greenville. And this Prime Minister is not one who is into photo opportunities. He's not to go and sit down in a canoe and smile for a photo and then come out, or be seen handing out a case of water. The Prime Minister is there. He has been delivering his leadership. His ministers have been doing tremendously well, and we have been delivering. The shelters were up and running early Saturday morning. Delivery of goods and services, food stuff, warm food, water, clothes, all of these things have been going on. Now we're going to the critical stage of cleanup. And again, we as a government are there to ensure that persons are assisted in the cleanup campaign, and that is what is taking place. Just to finish this point off, there continues to be, and I'm now going to call him a national nuisance. He is now the national nuisance, a former government minister who is now the national nuisance, who 24/7 is feeding members of the media false information. He has gone past distorting reality and is now peddling complete lies. And I call upon the media here today. You all know who this national nuisance is. A former senator, a former government minister, a UNC former government minister. Last night, I will give you all one example of this nuisance's behavior. Last night, Mr. Devon Maraj on Facebook started peddling information about a certain Miss Sanchez and her 2 children and accusing the government and the police service of telling lies about deaths. Why would a government cover up the death of any citizen? And he started peddling that a young woman and her 2 children were missing since Friday, couldn't be found, they weren't in the shelter, contact this person, the government is hiding it. A complete fabrication, not a distortion of reality, a complete lie by this national nuisance. It was verified shortly thereafter, and it took police resources. One of our deputy commissioners of police took it upon himself to go and do the verification. Miss Sanchez was right behind Granville, to the north of Greenvale, right there in the La Joqueta shelter with her 2 children. The trauma that this nuisance is causing, I want the national population to take note of it. And media, don't give this nuisance and others who are peddling false information and distorting reality, especially in a time like this. We as a country are facing disaster in certain areas. Our job as citizens right now has to be to get to our brothers and sisters who are in need and to assist them, to get the resources that they need and to assist them. There have been concerns about looting taking place at night. Our police service and our defense force are better serving the population by ensuring their safety and security as opposed to running off in different directions following false information. I ask the country to take note and to ask yourselves one question. What is it that they intend to achieve by these 2 methodologies that they're using? This government is not going to be drawn into that. This government is not going to be drawn into that. We are going to continue to deliver as best as we can. We thank all of those who are assisting, all of those who have volunteered. We have servicemen and women, public servants, who have put aside their time. They came out and they worked over the weekend. They have been working all of today. They continue to work. The fire services, even the prison services, the police services, our defense force, our Coast Guard, all of the ODPM staff, the municipal corporation, disaster management unit staff, even the workers have been coming out. Our URP workers, our CPEP workers. When I went over Greenvale this morning, the CPEP workers were already there. I saw CPEP workers on the ground, our WASA workers, our TNTech workers, our HDC workers, assisting those who have suffered at this time and are in need in the cleanup exercise. The same thing I saw beginning to happen in St. Helena. I am happy to report to the nation at this stage that most of the areas that were under floodwaters in the last 48 hours, the waters have now receded and they're no longer under floodwaters. The majority of St. Helena, the majority of Kelly Village, some of the outskirts are still water affected, but the vast majority are not. You then go to Las Lomas, the Madras Road, Greenvale, and I'm sure there are other areas that Bamboo, unfortunately, is still underwater. So we're sending resources, more resources to there. As the water receded, we now go into the cleanup phase. I can tell you, and I'm pleading with people, on the Manzanilla stretch, there are long kilometers that are still underwater. I saw a person still trying to make their way through these floodwaters. You do not know that it is for 2 to 3 kilometers that are underwater at varying depths. Your vehicles run the possibility of being stuck. Please, I've been pleading with you all for the last 48 hours, do not put yourselves at risk. Some of the back roads, the southern main road is now clear. I am happy to report that the northbound lane of the Uriah Butler Highway is completely clear of water. There is one area along the southbound lane is starting to clear up. There's still about 100 to 200 meter area where there's some water on it. So the Commissioner of Police, Ministry of Works took a decision to allow certain vehicles to now use the southbound lane of the highway. I'm also happy to report that despite the warnings we had from the Met Office in the last 48 hours, we have not had the level of rain activity that was predicted. Thank God for that. It has allowed water to run off with the use of the tides, etc. as well. We are still not out of the woods, as they say. We expect this to continue into tomorrow morning, but fortunately at this stage, I'm happy to report that the vast majority of the water is running off. Areas of Mafeking are still underwater. In Mayaro, resources have been sent there. We are trying to get more and more resources, but at this stage, we go into the cleanup phase. What I'd also like to put on the record, sorry, I was just told that an update has come through from the CDS. What I'd like to also put on the record is that there's been a lot of criticism about the government's decision and my announcement not to declare today a day of no working. As you all have seen, the state of the roadways, etc., have improved. I was very careful yesterday to say that those who are affected by the flooding, obviously, they need to stay and get their houses in order. Those who are going to help them as well. But I'd just like to put this proposition forward to the national community. If the government had declared a close down, a shutdown, would the groceries be open? Would the hardwares be open? Would the pharmacies be open? How would people be getting supplies? The responders that you're now counting on to come and assist you in the cleanup drives, those workers are essential. The public servant workers who are coming now into these areas to help with the cleanup. If we had declared no work, where would they be this morning? Unfortunately, Mother Nature smiled on us and allowed some of the waters to go down. The highway, when we went to the highway between 5 o'clock, 7:30 this morning, there was no traffic on the Uriah Butler Highway all the way to Port of Spain, not even by the Beetham. Now, some people may say this is because people stayed away from work, but all of you all sitting here in this room came out to work, and that is what we need to do at a time and a disaster like this. When there were events in other countries, as someone reminded me last night, for example, when the bombings took place in London, the 7/7, the next day, London in a show of force, and to tell people we are up and running. That is what they did, and that is what we as citizens have to do. We need to be our brother and sisters keepers. When social development talks and education talk, if there were no workers out and no staff out to start processing, to get the checks for people who need now assistance in replacing their appliances, etc., what would happen? Every minute counts. So I would like to take this opportunity as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, and on behalf of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, for thanking everyone who made it out to work today. I'm not criticizing those who didn't, because that is everybody's personal choice. It also costs hundreds of millions of dollars potentially when you shut down a country. We made a judgment call, we stand by that judgment call, and we believe it was the right call. And up to this point, we continue to stand by it. I thank all of those who have done what they have had to do today and that they will continue doing, because we're not out of the woods yet. Now is a very difficult period in time. Also, the suggestion that we were not down on the ground. I said before, I have not posted any of the photographs, etc., specifically, because now is a time when people are suffering. People are dealing with a lot of trauma. So posting photographs of me in a person's house that is flooded and seeing the mud remnants and them showing me their appliances that have been destroyed, that is of no value to anyone, and not in particular, no value to me. There are people who are suffering out there. This is not a PR exercise. I walked for 2 hours from house to house, inside of houses, seeing what took place with people in Granville yesterday. Did the same thing in parts of Mafeking yesterday. It is not about the publicity for the government. It's about us trying to deliver and trying to be there with our citizens and ensure that they get their lives back up and running as quickly as possible in a very difficult circumstance for each one of those families that are affected. At this stage, I can happily report, but I'm still cautious, that there have been no reported fatalities. And I can't understand why an opposition and opposition personnel would want to call fatalities into a time like this. We had it even confirmed by the Ministry of Health officials that at this time, there is no reported fatality as a result of the flooding that we experience. That is always subject to change. And we're hoping it stays that way. And at the end, after all of the cleanup, we can continue to report. That is the statistic. We continue to have 10 shelters open in total in the Tunapuna, Sandy Grande, Mayaro, and Couva municipal corporations. The number of persons who are affected at this stage, we estimate 3,500 households. That can climb as we go into different areas and we do the assessments. That equates to about 120,000 persons. We have a population of 1.5 million. We need to be out to help those who are in need. And that is the reason why we ask people to consider coming to work and doing what it is. And I thank everybody who did it, especially our servicemen who continue to service, the volunteers, everybody else. At this stage, I'd like to pass over to the Minister of Education for him to inform us as to what is going on, and then our Minister of Social Development and Family Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Stuart. Minister Young. First of all, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to our principals, our teachers, and our school supervisors who have been on the ground all through the weekend to ensure that all our schools are in a state of readiness for today, and those schools that have been used as shelters, that the accommodation is up to mark. I have with me this morning information that I have received from our Chief Education Officer, who has been in contact with the Director of School Supervision, who herself has been liaising with our school supervisors, and they have received the information from the principals in our schools. At this point, there are 22 schools that have been affected by flood, and they have not been able to open today. There are 12 primary schools, 2 secondary schools, 8 early childhood centers, which brings to us a total of 22 schools. In addition to this, there are 9 schools that are still being used as shelters, 8 primary schools and 1 secondary school. And because of the floodwaters in some areas, a number of schools have not been able to provide access to both students and teachers today because of floodwaters. And there are 20 such schools, 10 primary schools, 5 secondary schools, and 5 ECCE centers. Our personnel from the Ministry of Education, our technical officers, are at present on the ground, liaising with principals so that they can get a better assessment of what is happening. And they will be reporting to the Chief Education Officer later today. I am hoping to be in a position later today to ensure that the information that I'm giving to you continues to be accurate. I also want to thank our social workers who have been on the field, because they recognize that a number of our students and our teachers and our parents have suffered tremendous trauma. And towards this end, since Saturday morning, they have been visiting the centers, not only the schools, but the community centers where persons have been allocated so that they can provide the necessary support. Because at this time, we realize that because of the losses some persons have experienced, it is important for us to provide whatever support we can give. Officers of the EFPPD department, these are our technical officers, they are assessing the situation again so that they can tell us exactly when our schools will be in a state of readiness, those schools that have not been open today. I am hoping that this does not stay long, but all the same, it is our duty and our responsibility to ensure that all our residents are well taken care of. I wish to make the point that there are in excess of 700 schools in Trinidad and Tobago. We have approximately 455 primary schools, we have 135 secondary schools, and approximately 120 ECCE centers. And of these 700 schools, we have about 51 schools that are directly affected now. And this is one of the reasons why in consulting with other officers, it was decided that today we'll ask all schools to be reopened. Also, the schools that are affected badly are schools that reside mainly in the Caroni area and in the St. George's area. There are some schools that have been affected from the northeastern area and some schools that have been affected from the southeastern area. But in other districts, the effect has been minimal, and therefore it was really no reason why we should have asked all schools to be closed today. It is our responsibility also to ensure that our students are provided with the quality education that is their right. And we are doing everything possible to ensure that we don't shortchange our students. I wish to make another point. I am sure that those students who have not had the opportunity of accessing an education today, in that school is not open to them, they will be taught by our teachers. This is not the first time that we have had to call upon our teachers, or in fact that our teachers have risen to the plate. Whenever in the past students and teachers have not had the opportunity to be at school, and our students having the opportunity to benefit from an education, all our teachers have been there making up for lost time. And I'm sure this will be no different. And in advance, I want to thank our teachers for the dedication that they have shown. I want to thank our principals, because on Saturday, when we made sure that some of our schools were used as centers, we called out our principals, and our principals were there in the centers, in the schools, ensuring that everything was done and everything was working as it's supposed to. And therefore, we must thank and we must show our appreciation to all those who have helped in this time of need. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garcia.
Good morning, everyone. I want to assure the general public that the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, working with other ministries and other organizations, have been taking action and will continue to take action to ensure that we bring our citizens back to a level of normalcy in as shortest possible time frame. Over the weekend, we were in the La Hawketa and Greenvale areas, because those were the areas that had been cleared. And during that period, we were able to conduct 227 assessments. That's in Manuel, Congo, La Hawketa, and Greenvale. And yesterday afternoon, we were told that part of St. Helena had been cleared, and we have been able to conduct 31 assessments. We are going to be back in those areas. Some of our staff are already in those areas this morning, and we are also going to be in Sangre Grande, Mayaro, the Warrenville area in Cunupia, and the Toko. Just before I came into this session, I was in contact with the MP for Caroni East, and he has advised that a number of areas are now clear that we can go into. This is Satnarine Trace, Boise Lane, Sunarine, Hydraulic, Rush Trace, Santa Monica, and we are going to have our officers in those areas today conducting assessments. Our expectation is that before the end of this week, we should be in a position to start providing those persons with grants. I also want to indicate that the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services will retain responsibility for replacement of household appliances and the furniture, and the Ministry of Housing, HDC, and Self-Help will treat with the grants for minor house repairs. This has been done in an effort to fast-track the process and to make it more speedy, because at the end of the day, the persons who have been affected, we want to bring back to a level of normalcy in the shortest possible time frame. So the agency, as I said, will be responsible for house repair grants in their developments, specific to their developments. So in this instance, we have already identified Oropoon, La Hawketta, and Greenvale. The Ministry of Housing, working together with Self-Help, will be responsible for the rest of Trinidad, in those areas that have been affected. Where persons would have suffered damages to their electrical wiring and their sanitary plumbing, they would refer those to our ministry. And because they would have already done the assessments, it would be just a matter for us to process. So this is all intended to fast-track the process. At this point, I want to thank the ODPM, the regional corporations, and the Defense Force, because they are in the field with us today, and they will continue to work with us throughout the process. And basically, those are the things that have been covered, but I just want to assure everyone the ministry is working. We are in the field. As a matter of fact, I came from in the field conducting assessments, and we expect to begin handing out these grants before the end of this week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ministers. Couple points. Continue to ask persons where there are roads that are still covered by floodwaters. Please do not take the risks. It was very disturbing to see people still doing that up to this morning, and then they have to be pulled out when the water is receded by tow trucks, etc. I'd like to thank, in particular, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Last night, they sent through the plan that they had in place for that portion of the Uriah Butler Highway between Caroni, the Caroni Bridge and the Monroe Road flyover, and they really put sufficient resources in place. It went very well. People were trying to say that the whole place would be chaos and complete traffic backed up. It was not like that whatsoever. The police did a tremendous job. All of those persons who are in the field, we thank you for continuing to do what you're doing. The UNC senators, the opposition senators, a short while ago, in their normal theatrics and politicking, walked out of Parliament. I'd like the population of Trinidad and Tobago to note all that you've heard the various ministers talk about, all of the money that is needed for not only after assessment, but for cleanup and for assisting and for our Defense Force and all our services, etc., fire services, etc. It is the budget debate that is taking place. Senators do not have constituencies to go on service. All 41 constituencies in Trinidad and Tobago have an MP. Right now you're looking at 3 MPs. And it is the MPs who are there. It is the councillors and the aldermen who are on the ground, etc. So question, whilst in the middle of an important debate like the budget debate to pass money so everything can be funded in our country going forward, senators of the UNC walked out to go and assist. Assist doing what? Posing for photographs? Citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, we continue to be with our brothers and sisters in a time of need. It is far from over, as I said. There's a cleanup exercise going on. You all have heard firsthand from the ministers as to what is taking place in those 2 respective areas. I assure you, in the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, they are out on the field. The Ministry of Works, the Minister of Works and the Minister of Rural Development, they have not stopped since Friday night. All of the staff, everyone, all of our citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. As the government, we thank you all very much for what you have done and what you will continue to do. And please know that you have our fullest support, and we will continue to work to deliver for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We'll take a couple questions.
Minister, good morning. Urvashi from CNC3.
Morning.
You gave some figures with regards to the homes affected, persons affected. Could you let me know how many people were have there been any persons who have not yet been reached?
Not as far as we are aware. In fact, the SITREP that I was just reading there, the Defense Force and the fire services are still out there in case persons need to be rescued. But at this stage, we're not aware of anyone who is still in need of rescuing. I will tell you all, when officers got to some of the people who were stranded in their homes, what had happened is there were some who refused to leave their homes. And that's understandable in certain situations and circumstances. We couldn't force them. In fact, you allow me to address something else. I've heard it being mentioned by the leader of the opposition and others that the government should go a certain piece of legislation and declare disaster zones and areas, etc. Again, those are last resorts. We're not going to have any state of emergency and declare places disaster zones at this stage. There's no need. And as time has shown, and the passage of time has shown, those were good decisions. Because when you do that, it triggers all different domino effects, etc. So at this stage, we don't know of anyone who continues to need to be rescued. If they are, do exactly what you've been doing. Get through to us and we'll get to you.
Minister, what about missing persons reports? Have you got any calls of distress?
No.
No missing persons.
Despite what the national nuisance may be telling you, the answer is no.
I did, in fact, visit Greenvale yesterday, and some of the residents were saying that there was a wheelchair-bound lady who was, in fact, rescued, and her family had been posting up on social media that she passed away at hospital. Have you got any such reports of any deaths occurring after?
Again, I think that was a CNC report that was on television declaring that that person had passed away or somebody else had passed away. As I've just said, the Ministry of Health, and I think it's the acting chief medical officer, has said no. At this stage, there are no deaths, fortunately, that are associated with the flooding disasters that we've just faced.
Minister, with regards to Greenvale in particular, my concern is, has it been officially declared safe in terms of if there is flooding again? We've got the Met Services did in fact report that we should be expecting some rain. Is it safe, given that it's bordering that river?
The Greenvale area didn't open overnight. What we experienced was a phenomenon that I hope we don't experience anytime at all going forward in the future. It was a coming together of Mother Nature. It proved that there are certain adjustments that need to be made. I am not an engineer. I'm not a drainage specialist, nothing like that. Those officers who are charged with that responsibility have to look at it. I can tell you from what I saw, there are a number of rivers that meander to the south of it. And then what you had is all of the water coming down from the north through the La Horquetta drainage. And it seemed they expect the water from the north at La Horquetta to make a 90-degree turn and turn west. It didn't happen. It kept going straight with the amount of water coming in. These things have to be looked at, and I'm sure that the authorities who are charged with that responsibility will be doing so.
I just have a final question. I know that, we're in cleanup stage here, but what about the psychological trauma that people have been facing? Because a lot of these persons say they can't go through this again. I just have to tell you, Minister, there was this woman in her house floating on cushions. And these stories, parents taking their kids up to the ceiling to hide in the roofs of their houses.
Correct. I mean, Urvashi, I too was on the ground for over 2 hours there yesterday. As I said, I went to house to house and had the same types of stories. They were heartbreaking. As I told people, I thank God that nobody's life was lost in these circumstances, and that, yes, it was a natural disaster, and now we have to try and find a way to pick up the pieces. I'll ask Cherrie to deal with the psychological effect, but it is something that we were addressing from that morning, the Saturday morning. I personally had spoken to the Minister of Health on the Prime Minister's instructions to tell him we need to get healthcare personnel there, and also the ODPM, whilst we were on tour that day, got in touch with the chairman of the Children's Authority, who's a specialist in that area, to ask for the psychological help and assistance. I'll pass over to Minister.
Thank you. From as early as Saturday morning, we recognized that people would need psychosocial support. So at the shelter, at that point, the shelter that was open was at La Hoqueta. We had 2 persons on board, 2 trained professionals, and they spent all day there counseling people. On Sunday, we went on to Caparo, Ascot Gardens. We had counselors in there, counseling persons. Today, we are collaborating with the Ministry of Education, and we have gotten a number of social workers, and they are now in the field going into the different areas to provide that support. In addition to which, persons can contact the Ministry of Social Development at our National Family Services Unit, and once they request it, we will provide that psychosocial support to all of our citizens.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Young. I'm Derek Catchon from Missionary Garden here. I just came from the High Court. Indications are that there were no remand prisoners being brought to the court today. Can you give us an update as to the situation if the flooding affected the prisons?
I can. That was a decision that was actually taken over the weekend. What we had is, at the height, no pun intended, of the flooding, a decision had to be taken because there were prison officers who there couldn't be a changeover of shift, etc. We did not know what they would be facing. When dealing with the movement of prisoners, that is not something you take any risk with. So the decision was taken early o'clock, and there was a limited amount of flooding at the remand itself that had subsided by yesterday. So there was an early decision taken in those circumstances. Let us not risk it or chance it, especially when dealing with the movement of prisoners. There's also, and I'd like to use this opportunity to extend my sympathy and condolences to the family of prison officer Francis. His funeral is taking place in Moruga. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend. Minister Hines has gone to represent the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Again, very sad circumstances. So there were also officers in the hierarchy and the executive who wanted to attend that.
You would have had the benefit of an aerial tour via helicopter of the country. I don't know if you went this morning again. Can you tell us the situation in terms of the river levels at this time?
According to the experts who must declare it, that's the Met Office, we're still at a red level for riverine. The rivers are going down, but what I managed to see over the last few days is when the tide rises, it is literally pushing the water back in. So when it's low tide, it depends on how much water goes out. Also the dropping of rainfall, if that raises it again. The river levels are still, some of the rivers, at fairly high levels. But for what I have seen is they have been subsiding.
Last question. Minister Young, you spent some time criticizing the public nuisance, as you call them, Devon Mirage. There was a situation though early into the disaster where there were social media reports of a lady, a diabetic lady and her family being trapped. You discounted that after your first helicopter tour. And, then we got images and video from the lady basically showing her being rescued on the ground. So, I mean, you call that one as a fake news as well.
I did not call that one as a fake news. Actually, if you go back and see, I said what we had done when we got the information and we were in the helicopter, we actually traversed the road. What we actually found now is when we traversed it, the vehicle that was submerged in the water, we did locate that vehicle that Saturday morning. So by the time I come here, we had found the vehicle. There was no one in the vehicle at the time, thank God. What happened is we kept calling the number. I had Captain Wint, head of the ODPM, calling the number over and over. We took no chance. At the time, I made sure, because the helicopter was on its way back, I said, please let us go along the Madras Road. And the area she described, we flew the whole length of the road, found this vehicle. When we found the vehicle, there was no one in the vehicle. In fact, that vehicle remains exactly where it is. It's still partially submerged in water. I thank God that the lady and the children and stuff got out safely and that no one was harmed, etc. At the time, and I'm always very careful, I said, at this point in time, this is the information I can provide.
Minister Young, Fane Richards from TV6. I don't know if this was brought to your attention yesterday. Forgive me if it was. But in the midst of praising the humanitarian efforts, the volunteerism, the charity, there were people on the highway, tow trucks in particular, we're charging up to $1,000 for a wrecking
Correct.
trek across the waters. I know someone who paid $400. Do you think that that kind of opportunism was warranted?
It's not for me to say whether it's warranted or not. If you ask me the question, if I were one of the wreckers, what I would do, I wouldn't have done it.
And also, just to clarify the issuing of grants from Minister Cockburn, the value of the grants from the HDC, is there a cap on that?
It's $15,000.
So in situations where the damage to a person's HDC home is well above and beyond that, is it that they're ending up fending for themselves financially to repair the rest of that damage?
In these circumstances, what the ministries, what the government tries to do is to help to bring you back to a level of normalcy. There is no way the government can cover the entire cost of the repairs if it is above that. So we work with what the figures that we have, and at the maximum is 15,000. But remember, if those persons also suffer the electrical damage or sanitary plumbing damage, the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services will then kick in with different grants.
Would there be any contemplation at this stage of perhaps a couple months' grace on any lease payments that they're making to facilitate some
I
kind of...
I would not be able to respond to that.
That is something that came up yesterday when walking through Greenville. First of all, that's not for any of these three ministers to address. That's for the Minister of Housing when he's done an assessment, etc., to then come to Cabinet.
Minister, could I just say
Of
something?
course.
Yesterday, a number of residents in the Greenville area, they would have placed their items outside, and in the effort to clean up, the corporation started removing those items. One of the requirements of the ministry normally is that we want to see those items, but recognizing what has happened and the situation that we are in, we have identified a number of other markers that we can use to do the assessment. So I just want to assure those persons they do not have to be concerned or worry. The affairs can be allayed. We are still going to be able to do the assessments and provide them with the grants.
And that came up very live and direct with every house I went into.
Yes.
So I'm very, very happy to hear that. All right.
Good morning,
Yeah.
Mr. Garcia.
Yes.
Shane Spovel from the Newsday here. I know you told me that you are awaiting a meeting with the Chief Education Officer later today, but based on the information you've gotten so far, those schools that are still open, what is the turnout like with respect to teachers and students?
Well, I don't have the information from all 7 education districts. I have information from 4, which I can share with you. For example, in the county district, where the primary school students are concerned, we have a 52% attendance of primary school students. And surprisingly, we have a 73% attendance of teachers. At the secondary level, we have a 32% attendance of students and a 54% attendance of teachers. In the Northeastern District, the information that I have now pertains only to the secondary school, and we have 21% attendance of students and a 59% attendance of teachers. In the Southeastern District, again, I only have information for the secondary schools. We have a 44.2% attendance of our students and a 69.4% attendance of our teachers. And in the St. Patrick District, 83% attendance of teachers and 83% attendance of students. That tells me that the teachers, in spite of the hardships, are making every effort to come out to school so that they can minister to the students.
And with respect to those schools that are closed due to the flooding, any idea or any indication when they may be back up and running?
Well, as I indicated before, our technical officers will be visiting those schools. In fact, they are on the ground right now, and they will be reporting back to us after they have done their assessment. And based on that assessment, we'll be able to say when those schools will be able to be reopened.
Minister Young, I have to bring to your attention that some residents, particularly in Greenville, because that's one of the areas that I visited, they complained of being left for dead by officials. That is the ODPM, the Army. They said that Army waited on dry land and it took volunteers in a rubber dinghy to actually rescue them, bring them out to their houses and take them to higher ground.
All right. Again, that is a CNC3 story that you all had on last night with a certain individual that you all interviewed saying that, as I've just said and as I said yesterday, you yourself have been to the Greenville area, you see. The Greenvale area, there are hundreds of households there. The electricity was shut off as an emergency precaution, a safety precaution on Friday night when we saw what was going on, because all of the electrical cables are underground. You don't want people getting shocked. Emergency personnel arriving there in the middle of the night, literally, there's no lighting, not knowing the area, had to be cautious in going in. As I said in this press conference, there were 2 boats. When you have 2 boats, you're not going to be able to rescue hundreds of people simultaneously. The point is, the fact is, thank God, and I think we're very, very fortunate, there were no fatalities. Everyone eventually was rescued. There are going to be persons, because I can imagine the fear that they would be going through there. Even for them, the water is rising, they don't know what is happening, they don't know if it's help. That gentleman in particular was saying there were helicopters. We said there were helicopters. There is no government official that would have said there were helicopters there at the time. We were very, very cautious. We knew what was going on. We were in contact. I was in constant contact with Captain Wint to know what resources were heading there. The Minister of Works and Transport was on the ground at Greenvale from 2 a.m. Saturday morning all of the way through. There are going to be people, when you're under fear, you're afraid, and you don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of trauma that they were suffered, and the gentleman is probably correct that he was not one of the first people who were rescued. Thank God persons volunteered. Let me tell you about some of the volunteers, because when I was there, some of the volunteers were actually military personnel. I spoke about a certain seaman from the Coast Guard who had reached home from work, saw what was going on, and used rubber dinghies, etc., because he knew the layout of Greenvale, and he led some of those rescue operations going in, etc. We apologize, but at the end of the day, I know, and I'm willing to stand with the men and women of our protective services in the front line, that they did the best they can. If he was on the inside, as he said he was, for hours, how does he know what's going on the outside for those same hours with the military personnel? That's just logistically impossible. I'm not saying that he wasn't traumatized, etc., and I'm not getting into any tit for tat, etc. At the end of the day, I thank God that no lives were lost. I am happy that he's able to tell his story now, and I hope that we all assist them in getting back on with their lives.
Just to correct you, Minister, that account was in fact from several people, but my question really is if these civilians or military-trained personnel could have
There's a
rescued
difference between the civilians and the military-trained
if these
personnel.
military-trained personnel on a rubber dinghy could have rescued persons, I don't know, for some reason I feel like national security should have equipment and they should have ways, they should have a plan.
And what makes you, weren't the people extracted? Didn't we just establish, and we've established over the last 3 days, that no lives were lost, and that the military personnel, the fire services, the Coast Guard, etc., got the people out? When I was there by 7 o'clock on Saturday morning, I saw those operations taking place. For the whole day, overhead, we saw those operations taking place in St. Helena, in Kelly Village, etc. I personally commend the men and women for putting their lives at risk, and I thank each and every one of them for all of the persons that they rescued, and on behalf of the persons that they rescued. They can always have more equipment. Even if you had 10 boats, 20 boats, it is still hundreds of people. So you do the math. You're not going to get everybody out at the same time. You also have to prioritize. You put yourself at the position in the front line, getting the information. There's a disabled woman, just as you all said. And there was another one, an amputee, etc. Those are the people you have to get to. Then the children and the elderly, etc. So it is going to take time. And let me tell you something. I'm sure, like me, you look at international news and television. When you saw what was happening in Houston last year, in Carolina this year, etc., for weeks, there were still rescue operations going on. And I'm sure every person, the longer you took to get to them, will tell a similar story. And their stories are not to be discounted. I am not discounting the story or the trauma that anyone faced. I empathize with every single person who has suffered as a result of this. All right? Thank you all very much.